the Photoshop Generative AI Challenge. The first task was to expand the frame for enhanced composition. The original image featured some people kayaking. It's a bit of a photo that an average person might take on a weekend trip. I figured I could use Generative Expand to make it more epic. So I extended the range of the canvas about 3 times bigger. I also wanted to test what Generative Expand would give me with and without a prompt. With a prompt, Generative Expand tried to fill the empty areas with the same image or with similar images. The biggest example of new content is the cloud patterns. Some images have thin, cirrus clouds, which was not present in the original image. With the prompt, Generative Expand made more attempts to fill the space with new content, but it wasn't guaranteed. I asked for factories, about half of them included it. What was interesting was that Generative Expand could identify man-made structures such as the power lines in the original image, and it placed the factories in that area. I achieved the most visual harmony by including a prompt that specified just more of the same kind of objects in the background. That is, extend the image with forest, clear sky, and lake, avoid adding clouds. In a quick visual comparison, you can see how we get the same image but more epic. The next task was to remove unwanted objects and people using generative fill. I thought the weekend kayakers were not very interesting. Not only did I have to remove them, but the waves, ripples, and bubbles they were creating. Generative fill did a decent job of removing the kayakers and the waves. The new content, however, is not as smooth. The reflections have sharper edges than I liked. The next task was to craft objects and people using generative fill. For this task, I chose a cyberpunk scene. The scene was so empty, I wanted to add futuristic cars and a person that looked like a detective. To do this, I removed the background before inserting the items and resizing them to scale. What I learned about that was that generative fill, of course, couldn't understand perspective and the proper proportions for distance, so I had to resize the items myself. The next task was to generate an entire image from scratch. I started with the prompt asking for a village in the style of Impressionism. Then I added some people into the scenery and a giant robot in the background. I was impressed that Generative Fill seamlessly added a balcony with a person in it to one of the buildings. Finally, I used Generative Expand to add more space and sci-fi elements to make the composition more epic. The next task was to use Generative Fill to add realistic reflections to an image. I started with an image without reflections. I thought to add realistic opportunities for reflections, such as windows and a puddle. Generative Fill, of course, doesn't know what to reflect, so I tried giving an image of what I wanted it to achieve. The final image came out pretty authentic. I was amazed that Generative Fill knew to generate the original man in the image without instruction. I guess it has an idea of what the contents are about, but maybe not a clear way of depicting it well, hence the need for examples to train it. The next task was about adding accessories to an image. I started with the image without anything special, just a man. I added a tattoo and sunglasses. To make the tattoo more realistic, I manually blended it into the man's skin. To make sunglasses look more like an emoji, less like an emoji, I trained Generative Fill with an image of a man wearing translucent sunglasses. The final image came out pretty authentic. I was amazed that Generative Fill knew to generate the original man and image without instruction. I guess it has an idea of what the contents are about. The next task was to utilize Generative Fill to adjust expressions, hairstyles, and facial characteristics. Here's the original image. The task was actually pretty hard. For example, when I asked Generative Fill to remove the mustache, it actually kept the mustache and distorted the face. Relying on training was the way to go. The final image came out pretty authentic. I was amazed that Generative Fill knew to generate the original man again, and to keep everything very similar, even though it had all these different changes from the hair to the facial expressions. Next was to create engaging reflections, revisited. Here's the original image. It was easy enough to get the puddle effect, but doing the mirror was pretty hard. In the earlier reflection task, I was amazed that the AI used the original man and image to create the reflection. This time, I wasn't getting that outcome, clearly. I had to resort to using a generic stand-in in the back. And that completes this week 3 assignment. Thank you.